All right, hello friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud. So tonight we have Monk Chat. This is the time for the next hour and a half or so for you to ask all the questions you've been waiting and holding this whole week and typing them in the chat so that I and myself can do our best to answer them. So over here is Aya Sudina and I'm Bhante Jayasara. Welcome Rick, Kumu, Jayanta, Karen, Richard, Manal, Yankee. Hello Jake, Julie. Should I do the Bhante Siddhasa thing? Oh, no questions. I guess this is a quick monk chat. We're done. No. We'll wait for the questions to roll in. Hello, Sam. Mary, welcome. Jay Lyles. All right, Jay Lyles has the first question. What is the nature of enlightenment? Do you have an answer to that?
No one has still got enlightened, so it will be something like what we think it is. So, shall I say something?
Sure, if you like. Yeah, we can both say each question. We can both add to it if you want.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, enlightenment, in the sense of, as you know, from what we know, is a complete purification of the mind, so that now, as it is, we all of us, whether worldlings or whether they are monastics, we all have our own defilements in different degrees, maybe. When we have got rid of all those defilements, then we say, we are enlightened now. So, when once we get from what we can see in the suttas and from the lives of the Arahants and the Buddha, what we see is that they are, whatever happens, they are equanimous. They now, whether it is pain, now we know that Buddha was at one time hurt by a stone which fell on him, and he had excruciating pain, but still his mind was just the same. There was no difference in his mind, but he felt the pain. So in the same way, all other monks and nuns also, once they were enlightened, they did not feel in the same way about worldly things. This one example is pain. The other things are, what we see outside. There is no craving, no anger, no ill will. None of those things are there. So with that, I think Bhante, continue.
What comes to my mind when I read what is the nature of enlightenment, what comes to my mind is freedom from suffering. Right? The Buddha says Nibbana is the abandoning of greed, hatred, and delusion. Right? The eradication of craving, of ignorance. That's the nature of enlightenment. Jay Kala asks, are Bhante Sudaso and Ayasoma in Italy? Yes. Yes, they're in Italy again for a month or so. I'm going to be here till Sunday. Then I will be here covering the monastery for the next week. And then after that, Bhante Sumita will be back, November 7th. And Bhante Sumita will cover Buddhist insights until the Bhante and I come back. Rick has a question. Is the nature of the mind turbulent or peaceful and still? After over 40 years of practice, I get the sense that the mind is like a still pool, if not agitated. However, when trauma is triggered, it seems like the mind is an out-of-control whirlwind. So the question is the nature of the mind turbulent or peaceful?
The nature of the mind is what we make of it, isn't it? Because the mind is, now we talk of nama, rupa, mind and matter. So the matter is what we see, the mind is what we don't see. So the Buddha says the mind, in one Dhammapada verse, it is given that when a fish is taken out of the water, it starts, to jump about. So the Buddha says in the ordinary person's mind is like that. So that when you ask about turbulence, I think that is what it means. But once it is trained, the mind, when it is trained through the Dhamma, then it becomes calm and peaceful. So long as we maintain it in that manner, it will remain the same. Whether something happens to us or whether it doesn't, we will be still equal. We will be able to contain that equilibrium. But if we don't train the mind, then of course it will be, when things happen, it will be turbulent.
Yeah, what comes to my mind here is the nature of the mind either or. No, to me, the nature of the untrained mind is to alternate between the two. Right? Even the average person has experiences of a peaceful and still mind. But this, you observe the mind and you see that the mind is just kind of bouncing between these various states. Right? And the longer you practice, the deeper your practice, the more you grow your insight and wisdom, then you can have the mind be more calm more of the time. Less turbulence. But still, the turbulence is still there every once in a while. I think the turbulence is there until you're fully awakened, one way or the other. Hello, Elaine. Welcome, Steve, Sud. I don't know if I welcome Mary yet, so Jay Lyles, we asked the question. Jia, welcome. Shadow of Label. So we have a question about chanting. Shadow asks, where does a person start with chanting? And what to do with it? And why does it create bodily vibrations? So where should...
Can you say it?
Yeah. Where does a person start with chanting? Like if somebody wanted to start chanting, how would they start, or where should they start?
Mm-hmm. And there's some more to it.
Yeah, what to do with it. So it's like, where does a person start chanting and what to do with it?
It's a little confusing.
Well, if somebody wanted to start chanting, what would be your advice?
That is it. It depends on the circumstances, isn't that so? Mm. Now, when you go into the shrine room, for instance, if I take my own experience, now when we were at Bhavana, we used to have chanting in the morning and in the evening. So the morning chanting was very often the Pali chanting, and in the evening it was the English. In English, the same thing. So now at our Arama, I don't have the morning chanting. I usually have only the evening chanting. So they are depending on the people who come. If they know the Pali, we do it in Pali. If we don't, if they are not very familiar with the Pali chanting, we do it in English. So that is why I said it depends on the circumstances. Now, what was the question again, please?
Yeah, that's good. Also, why does it create bodily vibrations? Have you ever had the body vibrate when you're chanting?
No.
No, me neither. No. Yeah, I think that I said good here. You know, there's hundreds of different ways that people in the Buddhist world chant, in different ways and different practices and different. So try them. You know, try them all, or try what interests you and see how it works.
But one thing is that the Buddha has said not to make it like a song.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is why we try to now even the Jayamangala Gatha, Bahum Sahas, you know, that one. So that chant also now it is used in Sri Lanka when there is some very auspicious something happening. They chant at least a few of those verses, but that is chanted in a very musical way, with music also. But Buddha has said not to do it for us.
Yeah, this is in different traditions. Their chanting is a bit more musical.
Yeah.
And I think for people coming from outside, for people in America and the Western world, I think they prefer the more musical than the monotone.
But it depends on the outcome.
Yeah. All right. Kumu has a question. In the 8 precepts, how do you explain Uchasayana Mahasayana Vedamani? Does this refer to overly comfortable chairs? Or is it okay to sit on a simple chair while observing the precept?
Yeah, it depends on the chair that we sit on, or any other, not only chair, but maybe a bed or whatever. Once you have taken that precept, what it means is not to look for a lot of comfort. So that now normally people when they sleep or when they sit down, they would like to have a very comfortable position. But in this case, what it means is that we should not do that, because this is a case of restraining. And all the other precepts are also very meaningful if we take it in that sense, that they are at least for that time, when you take the 8 precepts, now on Poya days, that is, Poya days means on full moon days or the half moon days, the dark moon days, we take the 8 precepts. I mean, the lay people also take the 8 precepts. And then they spend the time in the temple, the whole day almost. So then it is very meaningful. So because they try to restrain themselves, just like the monastics.
All right. Yeah, the Pali Ucha means like tall, and Maha means like great, right? So when somebody like Aya is a Mahateri, right? So when you become a monastic for 20 years, then you become a Maha, right? So this is that word. So it like Aya says, it's like looking for lots of fancy, pleasant comfort. All right. Jayanta has a question. Can you explain what is contemplate and what is concentration? And what are the Pali names? How do we apply both?
Contemplation and
Concentration. So
concentration.
I would think it's like nusati and samadhi, maybe the difference between those two, or is contemplate.
Concentration is sati, isn't it? Concentration, sati.
Usually they translate samadhi as concentration.
No.
No?
Sati. Sati is concentration.
No, sati is usually mindfulness.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sati is mindfulness, yes.
Yeah.
Then concentration and contemplation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So concentration, samadhi. Samadhi is the one-pointedness of mind, isn't it? In samatha meditation, especially, but also in vipassana meditation. Yeah. So that is concentration, and then the other one is contemplation. That is like thoughtfulness or something like that.
Yeah.
Or,
what comes to my mind is like Buddha nusati, Sila nusati. Like nusati means
anusati,
like to
anusati.
contemplate. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that means sort of giving attention to some subject, right?
Yeah. The way I would answer this is like the Buddha gives various contemplations, right? So like we just mentioned, like Buddha nusati, like contemplating the Buddha's qualities, the Dhamma, the qualities of the Dhamma, the qualities of the Sangha. Sila nusati, contemplating the qualities of your virtuous deeds. Right? So these are contemplations. They're more kind of like active mental verbal things, right? You're bringing up things. You're actively doing something. Whereas when you're trying to practice like anapanasati, or trying to concentrate the mind, the more activity you're doing with the mind, the harder it is to concentrate the mind, right? So these are kind of two different modes, I would say. You wouldn't necessarily try to do them both at the same time.
Contemplation takes place before the concentration.
Yeah, a lot of people, that's how it is. Yeah. So I would also say that it's easy to contemplate. It's like for a lot of people, they're running around busy, so it's not necessarily always easy to practice samadhi or samatha, but they can always contemplate. When they're driving, they can practice sila nusati, right? Or they can practice various satipatthana practices, which are also, there's many contemplations and foundations of mindfulness too. Richard says, how do we reduce patujana and increase kalyana jana?
Patujana?
Yeah, patujana. I've never heard the second word, kalyana jana.
I think that's not, I have said not heard of that.
Yeah, I mean,
usually it is said as ariya. No? Ariya. Yeah. So the difference is the worldling and the noble person.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That is the difference. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The worldling is one who has never sort of taken to the Dhamma or started practicing it. But the noble person may not have attained spiritual state still, but is practicing. So such a person is called Arya, noble person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you reduce being a patujana? Follow the Noble Eightfold Path. Right? That's the path that leads to the end of being a patujana. All right. Manas has a question. Dear Venerables, how does one completely eradicate conceit?
Conceit. Yeah. The conceit comes with asmimana. That is thinking that there is a person here and there are three ways of doing it. I am, myself, mine. So this conceit comes when you think of it, of yourself in those terms. Now let us say I am. I am an engineer. I am, I am a scholar. I am, you think of yourself as someone who knows everything or whatever it is. I am. Then when you say, this is mine, then it is that you possess, you want to possess something. It is mine. So I am mine, and the other one is me. Yes, this is me. Right? So the conceit comes with that idea of self. That now that is not necessarily the idea of soul that is found in certain other religions, but the idea of self is something that I think everybody has, and it takes it takes a lot of practice to get rid of that idea of self. But when you get rid of that, then that conceit also is gone, because the conceit comes because of the idea of self.
Yeah, when you look at the fetters, one of the last fetters is the conceit I am, right? And only an arahant has fully abandoned the conceit I am. So how does one completely eradicate conceit? Become awakened. This is why I always say, when people ask a question, I say, well, the answer is the Noble Eightfold Path.
Yeah.
That's the answer. It's the path that leads to the ending of suffering. All right. Jake asks, what can I do to be more kind in my speech? I've found myself involved in negative talk about others at work. Sometimes I start these conversations, sometimes others, but it's hard for me to catch myself.
It is a case of judging. When you meet somebody, you start judging that person in different ways, mostly on negative terms. But at the same time, now when you are having a conversation with somebody, if something irritates you, the other person says something that irritates you, before you answer, before you retort, react to that sort of whatever attitude or whatever feeling you get, if you think for yourself a little, give a little space to not to answer immediately, then sometimes you might not say what you might regret later.
There's for those of you who have done like woodworking and things like that, worked with your hands, you may have come across the old saying, measure twice and cut once, right? And so I've adapted that to think twice and act once.
Some people say count up to a few numbers, like count up to 10 or something like that.
Yeah. So what this means is this is a way of training your mind to really pause before you have the words come out of your mouth, right? To really pause. Right? Now, it's hard because if you're untrained in mindfulness, then there is no break. There's no pause. Something arises and it comes out of your mouth. But if you train yourself in mindfulness and train yourself in satipatthana, you can use the think twice and act once as kind of like a like an anchor. Like you're about to go into a conversation with somebody, you remind yourself, think twice, speak once. And so when then a thought arises, oh, I should say this, you can hold off, and then that gives you a little bit of time to kind of contemplate and reflect on what you're going to say and the possible consequences of it. So remember, think twice, act once, and that can be a little trick to help you, to help you remember. And do your best to not start the conversations. Sometimes you get stuck in the conversations, right? I remember this at work. And I'm not really a gossiper, never have been. I just do my own thing. Even when I was at work, I didn't often just go to other people's places to chat, right? Sometimes people would come to me and then to talk about a case or whatever. And then another person would come and then another person would come. There'd be 4 people there. And it would go from work to talking about, oh, did you hear what such and such did? And, these people are doing this and that person. And I'd be like, oh boy, how do I escape my own desk? That's a tough one. So when I couldn't escape, I just tried to be very, very mindful of my body and mind during this conversation, what was happening, and how I could most skillfully steer the conversation or end the conversation or escape the conversation. One of those 3. Right speech is not easy. It's a hard one. But it is one of the major factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. So it's part of the training. Jay Kala wants me to give him a salesman's pitch on Empty Cloud. How does it run? What is the property like, etc.? I think that's probably better to ask Bhante and Aya.
What's the question?
When they come back. Oh, he's just asking about a lot of things about Empty Cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think it's probably better to talk to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information just on the website.
The Samanera.
I just updated the website.
Samanera Metiko says that there's a lot of information on the website. I mean, from my experience, it's pretty typical of a typical Theravada monastery. It's not that drastically different. Elaine asks a question. I'm wondering about the Buddhist perspective of Halloween. Not the trick-or-treating aspect, but rather all the commercialization of ghosts and demons. Do you understand that, I?
A little bit, because today when we were going, my experience of it, I'm telling you, Deepa and I, we were going for a walk, and there were skeletons all over.
Yeah.
So we thought it was very eerie of a way of celebrating something. Is Halloween altogether so, concerned with the skeletons?
It has very, very ancient roots regarding death and things like that. But growing up in a culture that had Halloween and going trick-or-treating, skeletons and ghosts and witches and things like that. Yeah. And demons.
I have no idea about it.
Yeah.
We don't have anything like that there.
Yeah. Yeah, but does Sri Lanka have a kind of Day of the Dead or something like that, where you honor ancestors? No, nothing like that.
When someone dies, what they do is give a dana and have a talk and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not this.
Yeah. Sri Lanka has very, very ancient Buddhist roots.
Yeah.
The most ancient Buddhist roots. So I could speak a little bit to this. Obviously, there's no kind of Halloween thing in Buddhism. But interesting tidbit, I had my Pabbaja. I became a Samanera on Halloween, 2015. So I put robes on for the first time on Halloween 2015. And Bhante Silananda said, he said before, he said, you should not ordain on this day. It's not an auspicious day. And I said, well, Bhante, I like Halloween, so it's pretty auspicious for me. But no, it's not an auspicious day in the Sri Lankan tradition.
Don't know whether this person has seen the skeleton in Theravada, monasteries.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
so that might have inspired this,
Yeah.
question.
The commercialization of ghosts and demons. No, I think that they're not being specifically commercialized because they're ghosts and demons. It's just because that's the tradition, that's the culture. Right? That's all. Yeah. Elaine keeps going. Let me just see here. So many houses have been decorated with skeletons, just like you said, and ghosts. While it can be fun, so I suppose for kids, for me, it seems like it might not be a good practice. Your thoughts? If practice mindfulness of death practices, right? Just like if you go to Bhavana Society, right before you go into the meditation hall, there's a skeleton. I named the skeleton Jack. And I would hang out with the skeleton every day. During the evening meditation, I'd go out, I'd do my walking meditation, and I'd hang out in front of the skeleton, and I'd do my mindfulness of death practices, and I would do my metta practices, and then I'd go and I'd do my sitting practice, right? So you can see skeletons, and you can see ghosts, even petas, right? We have petas in the Buddhist tradition, right? They're simply just, it's the ghost realm. In like the Tibetan tradition, they're called hungry ghosts, right? But there are ghosts. There's even a Sri Lankan Bhante who took the Petavatu, the Petavatu, and he named it in English. He says Buddhist ghost stories.
Which is true.
Yeah.
But at the same time, most monasteries have a skeleton.
Yeah.
But that is for the purpose of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Jay Lyles, I don't know. I think maybe some possible clarification might be good for this question. So he says, Venerables, I often find that people can reach an understanding, but quickly forget and return to their prior ignorance. What is the best way to encourage them to remember what they've learned? Reach an understanding. Is this like people who are kind of maybe they have arguments or whatever and they reach an understanding, but then that doesn't last long? Maybe? Is that what you mean?
It's a case of memory, is it?
Yeah, I think it's a case. I would say it's a case of
like
habit.
Part of mindfulness.
Yeah, mindfulness, habit. Yeah, to really kind of. Well, I think it's also a case of that question from before about the mind. Is the mind calm and peaceful, or is it all over the place? And it can be both. So maybe a person, they have this conversation and they come to an understanding because their minds were peaceful, but then 3 days later their minds are agitated, so it happens again. Yeah, I don't know. Mindfulness. See, the word sati, yes, it means mindfulness, but really what it means is recollection. Sati is the quality of being able to recall things. And to be mindful, you need to remember to be mindful. You have to train yourself in having the mind be mindful. And until you do that, you can say, I'm going to be mindful today. And then 5 minutes later, you've lost mindfulness and you don't have it for the rest of the day. You forgot to be mindful. You didn't train it enough. So you have to train it. You have to train, you have to develop, strengthen your sati so that you can remember what you have done. The Buddha uses the word sati often. He talks about in being able to recall what one has learned, right? Even, and especially also in terms of memorizing the teachings, to be able to recall what one has learned. So yeah, you have to practice, develop your sati so that you can recall, you can remember what you learned.
Mindfulness has many meanings.
Mhm.
One is memory, and the other is what you said about recalling what you have already learned. Yeah.
All right.
And also about that, now supposing we are mindful and then we are not mindful, but again after some time you remember and then again you become mindful. Then that means you have regained the mindfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when you train it so very well, you can totally forget about it, but the mindfulness comes to you anyway. I can remember being in a very, very stressful situation in my job. And by this point, I had been a Buddhist a number of years by this point, maybe 4 or 5 years. And I was in a very stressful situation, and I had to be kind of juggling a lot of things. I had to be talking to the parents, talking to the police, talking to my supervisor, talking to all these things. And I was just kind of just going with it, just doing everything, going like this. And then all of a sudden, it was like somebody came and knocked on my head and said, remember that whole mindfulness thing you've been training for lots of years? Be mindful. And then all of a sudden, mindfulness came to me. And I was like, oh, what have I been doing? I need to be mindful during this situation, right? And that's because I had trained it, really trained it. And so it becomes like your shadow. It never really leaves you. Even when you forget to be mindful, sometimes your shadow comes up and says, be mindful, remember me. So training it is very important. All right, Rick has a question. Due to living with life-altering chronic illness and pain, I think, Rick, that was our topic yesterday. I think you came in towards the end of it, though. I don't think you caught the whole thing. Due to living with life-altering chronic illness and pain, I frequently wake up feeling aversion and resistance towards getting up and facing the activities of the day. My mindfulness has grown strong as I have investigated this. What would be skillful ways to work with this impediment to daily life practice? Like skillful ways of dealing with aversive mind states that keep you from doing skillful things.
Unskillful.
Yeah, like aversive mind states, like negative mind states that keep you from being skillful. Yeah, that you do unskillful things.
Yeah, it's mindfulness all the way.
Yes.
But when there is pain, it's a little difficult to think of mindfulness because the pain overtakes the mind, right?
Yes.
And then when that happens, you as you said, aversion comes. So that is where now when the aversion comes, you have to see what's happening in your mind. And when you see that aversion, then you can think, oh, I'm doing what I should not do. Sometimes we have to talk to ourselves, and tell the mind, we must do something else, not this. And when you turn it to the, turn it over and then make it non-aversion, right? Or no aversion or no ill will towards that pain, then it will be like Buddha said, you won't have two darts instead of one, which is the physical pain. The physical pain you cannot avoid, because we all have these physical pains. It is a case of training ourselves to, now when we are seated like this also, when we sit for a long time, naturally there will be pain. But when pain comes, of course, we could change the posture. But instead of that, if you can endure the pain for some time, just like every other thing, the pain also is impermanent, so it will go. But sometimes we don't have that patience to, look at it, see it, and understand it. Because pain, so if you understand it for some time and you look at it, you will see that it is not one block of pain, but little spurts of pain that, one comes, then another, like that, just like everything else.
I think the metta practice, the Brahma Viharas, or when that aversion, especially with pain, as we talked about last night, that can be very helpful. And just to soften that a little bit for that investigation, as I was talking about, it helps the heart soften around that. And when we feel that jab of pain, it helps.
Yeah. And Sin says, metta. Sin says, I've been practicing metta and I really think it's getting better. I'm able to bliss myself out. I love it. Yeah, that's good. I remember being blissed out by metta, but then that went away. So don't get too attached to the bliss, right? Like anything that's blissful, is whatever it is, don't get too attached to it because it might go away. You can still practice metta and have goodwill, but don't get too attached to it. That's why I remember I went to Bhante Ji and I said, Bhante, he's like, my metta used to be very powerful and blissful. And he says, well, it's just a feeling. It went away. And then he said, until I understand impermanence very deeply, my metta will only be skin deep. That's what he said. I always remember that. That was very profound. When I was bringing him his evening drink, and I asked him this, and he told me that. Yeah. All right. So we do have a question here. Julie asked, can you please speak about the experience of cessation in relation to the 4 stages of enlightenment?
I was wondering where you were.
Yeah, and I was doing some school.
Good that you came in and not at this room.
So cessation in terms of like the 4 stages, Sotapanna, Sakadagami, Anagami. Yeah.
Cessation.
Yeah. The experience of cessation in relation to the 4 stages of enlightenment.
That means what taints are, sort of given up.
That's what I would think as well.
The first one is at Sotapanna stage, there are 3 stains or 3 fetters that are given up. That is the Sakkaya Ditthi, and that is the idea of self, or we could also say ego. For you to understand, like that is Sakkaya Ditthi. That is the first one. Then the second one is doubt about everything, like whether it can be doubt about mundane things or about spiritual things. Sometimes people doubt about the Buddha, whether he was actually enlightened, or whether he said all these things, or things like that about the Buddha. Then about the Dhamma, is this Dhamma going to help me? Then about even the Sangha. And to tell you, a certain person came to my arama, to the arama where I was, not here, in Carolina. And he had been a monk for 1 year or so and given up because he was looking at other monks and seeing their defilements. So I told him, why do you want to look at their defilements? Look at your own defilements and try to get rid of them. Instead of that, here you have given up your robe also, and now you don't know what to do. And he was really not only doubtful but also restless, and his mind was not working properly, and he couldn't do anything. Anyway, the doubt is one, Sakkaya Ditthi, that is about self, that is another, and the other one is about rites and rituals. Now, during the Buddha's time, rites and rituals, what he meant was just, some certain belonging to certain, some people belonging to certain or believing in certain religious rites. They go to the Ganges river and they bathe and think that they are all their defilements have been washed away. So that was that kind of ritual, and there were certain other people who lived like dogs, who lived like cows or bulls, eating grass and, walking on all fours, like arms and legs. So those were the things that Buddha was referring to. But today, even people talk about, now when we light candles in front of the Buddha statue, or we burn incense, or we place flowers, some people say, are these also rituals? But it can become a ritual if you are doing it just for, the sake of putting it there, and then you forget about it. But now when you say, when you keep the flowers, there is that gatha where we say, these flowers, though they are so beautiful and so sweet smelling, in a day or two they will all wither away, and our bodies are also like that. So that is the idea behind that. We have to think of, now when we light a candle, we are not just lighting a candle. We are lighting the candle to think of the Buddha's greatness, the Buddha's great knowledge and wisdom. Those are the things that come with that lighting of the candle, and we are respecting the Buddha for being the Buddha, for giving us the Dhamma, so that today, after 2,600 years, we are still following the Dhamma, and we are, we feel that we have acquired some kind of peace and calm within ourselves. So when we think of all those things, these rites and rituals are not exactly lighting candles or keeping flowers or burning incense. So anyway, those three are the three fetters that we lose when we reach Sotapanna. Then when we reach Sakadagami, that is the second step, that is what you say in English is
Once return.
Once returner. The fetter of ill will and fetter of lust are sort of little weakened only, but not entirely gone. But with Anagami or non-returner, those two are, given out. And with Arahant, then only that all the other fetters are sort of, they go away. The last one to go is Mana. That is conceit. and also ignorance.
Yeah, I think that's good. All right. Charles Lee has a question about monastics. Do monastics legally change their names from the name they had as a layperson?
Is that all?
Yeah, that's the question. Well, people are often curious about different things about monastics, so they ask questions.
Yeah. So I think you should answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, well, yeah. I mean, yes, I do know. Most don't, and it makes sense because you still kind of have to be in the world, like legally. I mean, if you went through the whole process of legally changing your name, which I hear is a severe hassle, and then you have to worry about your passports and driver's licenses and all these things. It's expensive and it's a hassle, and doing all these things to legally change your name. No, it's not worth it. Now, like, people who came from other countries and they were monks already, like, on Bhante G's ID, it says Bhante Hanapolu Gunaratana, right? Like, yeah, because that's his name, that his monastic name, and he came, to America with that. But if you're born in the country and you have it, you have a Dhamma name. No, most wouldn't go through the whole process of doing that. So I mean, legally, I have my legal name is still the same, right? I did not want to go through the whole process to legally change my name to Jayasara Bhikkhu. Too much work. So yeah.
We are lucky.
Yeah. Too much confusion. I don't think I've ever actually met a monastic that has actually done it.
There's a
The
cost
chain.
involved too.
Oh yeah.
It's expensive.
It's a big cost.
So it
Yeah.
becomes
Yeah, I
a
had to
hassle.
do that actually.
You did?
Because my legal name was like a family name. And it was like mistakenly put on my birth certificate.
Oh.
So like Dinnery was like my middle name, and then like I had another name like Kalinimon, but like my first name was like Wandagawattavadagay. It's like a Shimokin like gay name, is what they say. I don't know. But I didn't even know that the name was there until like I was getting my license. Like all of my documents said Dinnery, but like my birth certificate. So it's like now in the process. Like me and my younger sister both have that actually.
Oh really? Yeah. So Shadow has another interesting question. What are the beads used for in Buddhism? Like in Japanese anime, the monks wear giant beads around their necks or have rosary-like beads in their hands. I know anime isn't accurate, but it brought Buddhism to my attention. No. So yeah, what you see in the anime, like they have those like the big wooden beads. The Japanese monks have those. I mean, anime like makes everything larger, like crazy larger. But like they have them, but they're smaller. Like maybe I've seen one necklace that maybe like this kind of big, like not like huge big, but yeah, this is something that you see like in monastics. Like you don't really see it too much in Theravada, although
it's a certain way of doing it. That is, there are 108 beads.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't use it, but there are some people who use it. It's like the rosary in the Catholic religion, where they, you use it like this. You have your finger on one, and then you say maybe itipiso, the gatha that we say to respect the Buddha. Itipiso. Then when you come to Bhagava, you take the next bead. Then like that,
I'm not experienced that.
Continue saying the Itipiso Bhagava, that gatha, again and again and again, so that the 108 beads are all covered.
Yes, yeah. And that's how it was in my very, very early days when I was exploring the different types of Buddhism, and I had all kinds of Tibetan knickknacks. I did have one of the necklaces, and what they do is, so like they'll have it wrapped here, and they'll put their thumb on it, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme, and they'll do that 108 times. And so they'll just keep like cycling it through. So it's for mantras, it's for chanting, it's for reflecting.
Maybe it keeps the concentration on that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, like Gita asked, how long will you be staying at the monastery?
Till next week.
Till next week.
Yeah. The next week, end of next week.
Yeah. So Thursday, I think in outside monastic we'll be covering the streams, but Friday morning and Friday evening, you'll be covering. So Aya will be covering the stream. So if you want to see more of Aya, tune in next Friday morning and evening. At least that's the plan that Aya Soma told me. Who knows? Anicca Vata Sankara. So who knows? We'll see in a week. Malika says that she's going to miss me when I'm in Australia. Yeah. This is, yep. This is the thing, right? And this is how life goes, right? I was supposed to stay a couple of days with Bhante Sujato when I got to Australia, but things have changed because of a sickness in his family, and so I might meet him towards the end of my Australian trip, but this is how it goes, right? And for many years, I tried to meet Bhikkhu Bodhi. 5 times I tried to meet Bhikkhu Bodhi, but always something came up. He was always sick. Right? So this is how it goes sometimes. But hopefully this won't be my only trip to Australia. One of these days, I'll get down there again, I'm sure. All right. Okay, here's a question. Does Buddha give any advice as to how one can make sure to attain human rebirth again, or to continue practice if one doesn't reach the goal in this life?
Yeah, the Buddha never encouraged rebirth as such. That means, you continue in samsara. Buddha always talked against it. And that is what he always said. Your suffering is not this physical suffering that we think of, Now, when we sit for a long time, we might feel that, that we are suffering. That is not the kind of suffering that Buddha talked about. It was this circle going round in the sansaric circle. He never encouraged that. In fact, he never encouraged even, heavenly births, though going to heaven is better than, I suppose, a human birth in certain ways. But on the other hand, the Buddha always said it's better to have a human birth because we have suffering here. And why is that? Because when we suffer, then we understand suffering. And then we try to find out ways of getting rid of suffering. Then we find the Noble Eightfold Path. So, therefore, the Buddha said it's good to get a human birth. But, can you say the...
Yeah, does the Buddha give any advice as to how one can make sure to attain human rebirth again so they can continue the practice if one doesn't become awakened in this life?
In certain ways, what this person says is true in certain ways. That is, to get a human birth is so difficult. That is what Buddha says. To become a human being is not easy. So, if you get a human birth, only that you can practice. If you become an animal, you cannot. So, therefore, to get a human birth, if you cannot attain to arahantship, if you cannot become an arahant, it's better to become a human being rather than a heavenly being. Because heavenly being means you have a long span of life there. Eons sometimes. So rather than that, of just sensual pleasure. in a heavenly birth. But when you get a human birth, yes, if you have practiced and you continue the practice, yes, it is a good thing. So the Buddha might have encouraged certain things like that. But I can't remember exactly.
That I think it's a group of suttas in the Samyutta Nikaya are so profound, where the Buddha says the overwhelming majority of humans in this lifetime will not be humans again in the next lifetime.
Yes, he
right?
took a little bit of sand on his nail and said yes.
Yeah, and of course the simile of the turtle, right?
Yeah,
So for those of you who don't know the simile, the Buddha says, he says it's really hard to explain how rare it is to be a human. He says, but a smart person can understand by simile. Right? And so he says, suppose there's the great ocean, and there's a turtle in the great ocean, and you put like a lasso, like a circle of rope out adrift on the great ocean. And every 100 years, a turtle puts their head up above. And the Buddha says, sooner would the random chance happen of the turtle putting their head up through the noose than somebody being born as a human. It makes it very, very, very rare, right? That's it. So being a human being is very, very rare. It's a precious birth, and don't waste it, right? That's what the Buddha says. Don't waste it. Practice, right? Because there's no guarantee. If you want a guarantee, you have to become a Sotapanna. As Bhante Ji would say, so become a Sotapanna. It's a money-back guarantee.
Yes.
Right. So if
you can become an arahant at least by 7 births.
Yes. Yeah. And no more hells. Minimum human or heavens. Right. Yeah. So if you want that, then try to practice well to become a Sotapanna in this life. All right. Shadow asks a good question. Is there a tenfold path and a higher number-fold path?
Is there
a tenfold path? Yeah, Bhante Ji talks about the tenfold path. He calls it the upper middle path. Right? When you practice the Noble Eightfold Path and you come close to the end, it becomes the Noble Tenfold Path.
Yes.
Right knowledge and right liberation. Yeah. Right? So Bhante says this is the upper middle class, or no, not the upper middle path, something like that, he says. But yeah. Yep. So yes, the Noble Eightfold Path becomes the Noble Tenfold Path. Kumu says, Kakachupama Sutta has lots of advice for right speech. Yes. Kakachupama Sutta is one of the best suttas for 2 topics, right speech and metta. I call Kakachupama Sutta the metta ideal. Right? That's a very, very important sutta for both speech and metta practice.
It is in that Buddha says there is an axe in your mouth. In Kakachupama Sutta, no?
I don't know that. I don't think that's. I don't know. It doesn't. I don't recall.
It doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Shadow of Labeless. Do you guys get to do more fun stuff when Bhante and Aya are gone?
What is say it again?
It's kind of like a joke thing.
Yeah.
He asks if we get to be more fun because Bhante and Aya are gone. No, we all follow the same monastic code.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay, but anyway, Rick has a question. Can you share some practical ways we can act with skillful compassion and not get caught up in unhealthy caretaking? Do you understand? So like in how we take care of other people and unskillfully? So how do we act with skillful compassion instead of unskillful caretaking? Like if you have to take care of somebody, like you
People must be doing really well.
Yeah.
because she does a lot of volunteer work. Yeah. So anyway, to care for a person, one must have metta. Without metta, one cannot do such a thing, because caring for another means, now sometimes you might have to do even menial things, like removing the excreta or whatever. So like that, now it is a difficult thing for people who are who have a lot of ego, for instance, or an idea of self, to give it up to do certain things for the other person. But when you practice metta, I think you can do, anybody can do, or to help another, because helping somebody else is really a very great service, and it is not something that you do for money, for fame, for prestige, but out of compassion for that person. So sometimes when you try to help somebody, that person may not like it also, and may start saying bad words to you or harsh words to you. But still, one must be able to have that patience to uh, endure that, and then to help that person, because you do it out of your heart.
So yeah, I guess what I would say is in terms of being a caregiver is a very hard, complicated, and exhausting thing. The Buddha tells us in the Dhammapada that one should not sacrifice oneself for another, no matter how great the need. Right? So the Buddha wants us to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves while we're taking care of others. So if the Buddha, and you read the suttas, the Buddha is always about what is good for you, what is good for others, and what is good for both. Right? So part of being a good caregiver, a skillful caregiver, is making sure you're taken care of. Right? Because if you don't take care of yourself, then you start to build resentment towards the person you're taking care of.
In the Dhammapada itself, there is that story about Buddha going to treat that monk who was sick. Mm-hmm. So in that particular story, at the end of it, the Buddha, because nobody had taken care of that monk, and he was in his own dirt. Yes, he was just lying there, and all over his body there were wounds. So the Buddha got the hot water there, warm water, and with the help of Venerable Ananda, he bathed this monk and clothed him in new robes and gave him the Dhamma. At the end of it, he attained arahantship. And when the Buddha came back to the Arama, the Buddha said, called all the monks and then said, now we are here, we have nobody else to look after us, like mother, father, brother, sister, aunts, uncles. Now in lay life we have many people, but we don't have anybody here. We have to look after ourselves. So therefore, when there is someone who is sick, if you look after that person, you will be looking after the Buddha. Like it is like looking after the Buddha himself. So in different places now, as Bhante said, he said that. Then in this particular place, he said this. So therefore, we have to think of it in those terms.
Mm. Yeah, this is why it's very important to, I'm going to repeat Bhante Sudaso, read all the suttas. Because if you just take one section, you think, oh, well, the Buddha just says this.
Yeah.
But no, the Buddha is saying this, and also in this sutta, he's saying that, and they go together, right? So you have to be, when you read all the suttas, then you can see that. All right. Shadow asks, do we ever miss our lay life or find lay life tempting?
I of course don't. Don't visit at all.
Yeah.
But I can't answer for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I think that I've spoken to many, many senior monastics, and every monastic I spoke to, these are people who've been monk 20, 30, 40 years. At least once or twice, they had kind of like a little crisis where they wondered if they should go back to the lay life, right? I think that's something that's probably mostly common, right? It's a hard life. It can be a very good life, but it's also a hard life. So I can imagine that somebody might want to do that. For myself, I'm still pretty young in the monastic life, but I don't think there's not really been an instant in my 6 years as a monastic that I've thought about disrobing. Not even an instant. So I don't really miss lay life. Now, sometimes there's parts of my mind that wish I could do some things that a lay person does, that I used to do. Right? And I think that's normal. It's like, because I'm somewhat of a new monk, I haven't been a monk for like 20 years where I've really kind of totally developed new habits in a new life, right? I'm still kind of in that transforming stage of, I still have a lot of the old habits from lay life. Right? But the longer in monastic life I live, the more those kind of go away and more monastic habits are developed. So yeah, I really can't see any reason to ever go into lay life.
Because it's the low life.
Yeah. Well, and I think also it depends on how far I've come far enough in my practice that I know that I could never fool myself to really enjoy all of the sensual pleasures of lay life again. Like, even as a layperson, I'm doing all kinds of sensual pleasures, and it's like, this is not that great anymore. It's like, it's okay. It's like that was before I became a monk. So it's like, I know, like I remember from my lay life, it's like, even if a thought comes, oh man, that was great. I was like, well, was it? Do you remember that? And then I remember. This is why one of the main reasons, actually, I don't want to forget a lot of my lay life. So I can remember that. If I, get to the point where you forget, because what happens, right? We remember the golden part of nostalgia. We remember the golden parts of our past, and we forget the negative parts. We forget the bad parts. So it's then you think, oh man, lay life was great and such, but you don't remember the whole thing. You don't remember the gratification and the danger, as the Buddha says. So, yeah.
It's also something that you have brought with you, isn't that so, from your past? That's how I look at it. Because not everybody is suited to become a monastic.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Dhamma, welcome Dhamma Learner. Dhamma Learner says that it's great to see both of us as a team. It's an enjoyable session. Well, this is the Bhante G team. We're ordained by Bhante G. Yeah. We're Dhamma siblings. Yeah. The same teacher.
It's great to say that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Elaine asked the question about Halloween. She said that her daughter has a skeleton dog, who she named, and the neighbor has an 18-foot skeleton that they named. One of my ordination gifts from a young guy who was the cook. He's a good friend of mine. He's a long-time practitioner. He's been meditating as long as I have. He was the cook at Bhavana for 6 months, but kind of like as a joke gift, because he knows I like skeletons and I would hang out with the skeleton. When I ordained, he gave me a little skeleton dog. So I had the little skeleton dog in my room at Bhavana until it broke a couple of years later. Yeah. All right. Welcome, Ronald. Oh boy, we're coming close. We only have about 10 minutes left. Wow. This has really flown by. Rick is talking about how he rehabilitates dogs, like he helps dogs, and that helps him with his own, suffering, helping the suffering of other beings. Yeah. Julie asks, do you have Dhamma talks online? Do you have a YouTube channel or anything like that? No.
It's not my work. It's my granddaughter who is doing that.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I never wanted it to be there.
Yeah. So maybe if you Google Aya's name, maybe you might find something. But no, there's no channel, I guess, or anything like that. But Julie really likes your Dhamma talks. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Julie, that means you're going to have to make a trip to South Carolina.
I hope so.
Yeah, maybe you can come. You can go stay with Aya for a little bit. Have a visit. Okay, interesting. David has a question. I like the name, by the way. David Lee Rath has a question. My father passed away almost 4 years ago. We were never very close, but ever since he passed away, it seems he or his aura is always around. Is there a Buddhist explanation for this? So the person feels like his father is always around?
So it can happen, of course. According to what we have learned in Buddhism, because when someone is dying, the last thought that that person had at the moment of death is what takes that person to the next birth. So sometimes it can be that this person could have, we can never be sure, but could have had sort of wanting to come back there again. In that case, yes, it can happen. But then it is very difficult to say that being is a human being or is a deva being. If it is a deva, if it's a deity or a deva, he will never come back to that place because devas don't like the human smell. That is what we hear from the the sutras and so on. But if it is a lower being, it could come.
A ghost, a peta.
Yeah, I don't want to say that. That's why I tried my best not to use the word. If this person is a Buddhist, he could chant some of the suttas, and and also give a dana or something, and then offer merit to that person, so that share merit with that person, so that that person will get a good rebirth.
And the monks can chant the blessings for the person. Yeah. All right, we do have, I think this is the last question, which is fine because we are coming close to the end. How would you describe what Buddhism is to someone who might not be supportive or may have biases, so that they may be assured this path is a positive one, particularly to a Christian parent? So, like, how would you describe Buddhism to somebody who might not think that it's a good thing?
We don't actually convert people. I must tell you that first of all, because Buddha never now, even when Upali, there is a sutta in Majjhima Nikaya called Upali Sutta, and Upali was a disciple of Niganthanatha Buddha, and then he came to the Buddha to have a sort of argument with him and win it and go back. But when he came there and started talking to the Buddha, he felt that this is the truth. And then he wanted the Buddha to give him the refuge, to become a Buddhist. Then the Buddha, what did the Buddha say? Every time that he said 3 times, he said, no, Upali, think about it. Don't be hasty and try to become a Buddhist, try to become. Then there were no Buddhists as such, there was no such word. Don't try to come into this Dhamma until you are really convinced. But he said, I am convinced. The more you say this, the more you tell me not to come, the more I am I want. And in the end he became a Sotapanna, mind you. So that is the kind of attitude that Buddha had for people who were outsiders. So we don't really try to convert people. But if someone wants to know about Buddhism, then we would talk about not the 4 Noble Truths, not the Noble Eightfold Path, but something like Metta, the 4 Brahma Viharas. The 4 Brahma Viharas are Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha. That is, Metta means loving kindness, loving friendliness. That you might find in other religions too. Like Metta, though it is not given in those same words, you might find it in other religions also. Metta, that is loving friendliness. Then the second one is Karuna, that is compassion. Surely you find in other religions also. And then there is Metta, Karuna, Mudita, that is an altruistic joy to be happy about other people's success. And then Upekkha, that is equanimity. So these 4 qualities you might find in other religions also, not in the same way maybe, but you find them. So we could give a thing like that to talk about these 4, and perhaps that person might feel more comforted or more secure or more sort of there is something that resonates with them also, if he is a very good Christian. What do you?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't necessarily say that describing what Buddhism is in some pithy way is going to make a difference. I think what might make a difference is living Buddhism and them seeing it. All right, this is also one of the things, like, my parents are very Catholic, and when I became a Buddhist, one of the things that I see a lot of people make mistakes with, they kind of try to either compete with their family's Catholicism or kind of like try to you eat with your family and there's hey, we're going to say grace, we're going to say prayers. And then you want to be like, well, also in Buddhism, we do this, right? Like you're trying to kind of force it on them. And that never brings any goodwill, right? That just feels like it brings up defenses, right? It feels, and so like, my family, my parents, like I was a Buddhist, but it changed nothing with my family. Like they this like, like I went to a monastery more, right? I took more trips. But in terms of their daily life and who I was, it wasn't like something so drastic that they felt like, it impacted them. When I went to become a monk, that's when that was a different story. That was harder. But I think, making sure that you're very cognizant of how you speak and act might be seen by them, and simply just living your practice, right? Showing them what it means to be a Buddhist, right? And that, a part of that is being able to have kindness and goodwill towards people who don't believe the same way that you believe, right? And knowing skillfully how to be with those kind of people, right? People who believe differently. That's a lost art today. Not a lot of people can do that, but if you can do that, then it's a good thing.
There was a certain person who came to our temple. Then he was a very convinced Buddhist, but his wife was was a Catholic, and there was a child. The child was also Catholic. So the two of them would always tell him, when we go to heaven, you will be going to hell. So he would just listen and keep quiet because there was nothing else that could change their mind.
Yeah. Well, he could say, well, in Buddhism, the hell's impermanent. So I've been there before. No problem. I can do it again. But yeah. Speaking of which, Julie is asking, what's the name of your Arama?
Carolina Buddhist Vihara. South Carolina Buddhist Vihara.
South Carolina Buddhist Vihara.
There is a website. You could go into that.
So I'll type it in. So. Sudina 2 Ds or?
SUDINNA.
2 Ds and 2 N's. Is 2 Ds and 2 N's?
No. 2 N's, only 1 D.
1 D, only 1 D and 2 N's. Yeah, okay. There we go. So I just I typed your name and South Carolina Buddhist Vihara, so this way they can Google it. So it is 9 o'clock, but I will. Nico, our friend who always asks questions, it has compiled a list, and it's basically, can you be a Buddhist and also every other Asian religion in existence? And the answer is a person can be what they wish. There's lots of people who mix Buddhism and other things. I don't think that you can become awakened and be other things. I think that there is, and Buddha speaks very strongly about right view, and if those other religions have views that counteract right view, then at that point you can't really be both. But that's pretty far. Most people are not going to become almost awakened in this life.
I got a book from someone. You are the one who sent it. Yeah, and that book said, what is the title of the book?
Before I could be a good Christian, I had to become Buddhist.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, and he was a priest, Catholic priest or Christian priest, I don't know.
Mhm. All right. Okay, friends. Well, thank you very much for lots of good questions. This went very well all the way to the end. So again, next stream will be Wednesdays and Thursdays are streaming morning and evening, but that will be a monastic from outside Empty Cloud. Then next week, Aya will be doing Friday. But if you like, you can, if you're close to the monastery, you can come Saturday night session from 6 to 7:30 at the monastery, and Sunday session from 1 to 4. So if you're local, you can come to the monastery and join us for the weekend. Okay, friends? So until next time, friends, Sukhi Hotu, may you be happy, practice well and be well.